The year was 1963. 22-year-old Raymond Spencer was living life like any young man. He lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He had 2 brothers, a job, just the normal American living his life. Then everything changed. Raymond Spencer was drafted and placed in the United States Army. He took his basic training in South Carolina at Fort Jackson, coming back to Philadelphia before one of the biggest events of his life happened. Private First Class Raymond Spencer in the United States Army Infantry Division, 1st Cavalry Division, 5th Cavalry, 1st Division, C Company were deployed to Vietnam. Raymond Spencer had seen this happen before. Both of his older brothers served in the last 6 months of World War II, and the younger of the 2 also served in the Korean War. He wasn't happy about what was happening, but like a great American, he heard the call of duty and went to serve with no complaints. He was to be a part of Operation X-Ray and land in Vietnam at An Key. When he arrived there by helicopter, he and his company were trained as were standard operations. They were in what was considered a safe area, but there were still soldiers guarding their perimeter. Training would be the easy part though. The worst would be yet to come. During training, Private First Class Raymond Spencer would still have different missions he was used in. Spencer, along with his company, would go out on week-long search and destroy missions. In these missions, he would take notice to certain things, like the fact that there were never any men in the village his age. As he was walking through the villages, he would see the elder people in the village point up to mountains, and they would always answer location questions with, "Up in the mountains." On this particular day, he was looking through huts when he noticed something. He seen a pair of sneakers hanging from the roof of this hut, which wasn't anything too unusual, but these were different. These shoes were swaying, but there was no wind outside. Someone had been in a hurry to get out of there. Only young men in villages like this were worried, so Raymond Spencer approached with extreme caution. He walked slowly up to the shoes, breathing heavier with every step he took. He then quickly entered the small hut, hoping for the best and expecting the worst. Heart-pounding, he searched the room corner to corner, but never found anyone. This was the closest he had ever been to any living, breathing enemy soldier.
Yeah, I remember one time we came to a village and there were always old people and young children, small young children. There were never any men my age at that time, like in their 20s or in their late teens, 18, 19, 20. No, there were never any men in these villages that were of our age. And we always wondered where they were, like who was the father of these children? Where was he? And some of the village people would say, they would point to the mountains, that they were up in the mountains. Well, that's where we were, the Central Highlands, they call it. And they would say they up in the mountains. So they were the enemy. But all the young people would, for the most part, would leave some of these villages before we would get there because they knew we were coming. So they would flee up into the mountain areas. And at one time I went into a hut. They used to live in these small huts because this was, you got to remember now, this is like the farmland of Vietnam. This is up in the highlands, the mountain region, and those people up there didn't live in the buildings. They lived in huts. And as we searched the huts and went through the huts, and one day I remember particularly there was a pair of sneakers hanging from the straw roof they had. A set of sneakers, they were hanging very low. And when I walked in, these sneakers were swinging back and forth. And there was no wind that day. So I assumed somebody's head hit those sneakers when they exited. And the sneakers were still swinging. So that told me that someone had just left the hut. But I never did see who it was.
With his closest encounter thus far out of the way, Raymond Spencer was looking forward to going back to his camp. Even though barrack life was tedious and hard, it beat battle. He went back to his tent and slept, clothing still on just in case. His rifle still close at his side. Awaking, he was hungry, ready to eat his K portion. 3 or 4 crackers and a can of peanut butter were good for him. Most times he would get 1 hot meal a day, maybe some eggs and bacons for breakfast, dropped fresh from the helicopter. With his stomach as full as it was going to get, all he could do was wait for his next assignment and pray to God that he would be okay. Now Operation X-Ray had fully come into effect. C Company and Raymond Spencer were given a main objective: protect the landing zone at all costs, make sure that our helicopters had a place to land. That didn't sound like too big of a job to some, but others realized what could actually happen. It was the first day of Operation X-Ray, November 14th. They were on patrol looking for Viet Congs, which were Vietnam soldiers. Raymond Spencer was the day's point man. He went out about 30 yards ahead of the rest of the company. Walking around this place was scary. No one would admit it, but there was a sense of it in the air. All of a sudden, a Viet Cong OS jumped in front of him. Raymond Spencer fired. He had missed, and wondered why his gun didn't keep firing. And later he realized that it wasn't set on automatic like it should have been. The rest of C Company came forward and started to fire at the Viet Cong. An explosion went off right in front of them. Shrapnel flew everywhere, and a piece lodged itself into the shoulder of Private First Class Raymond Spencer. As soon as they could, the Army got Spencer out of there. Flown by helicopter back to base camp, he got immediate medical attention for his injury. With his discharge on December 10th, he stayed at base camp for the rest of his duration. He was then discharged. Later on, when he was getting ready to go home, he reflected on his term in Vietnam. What was the brightest moment of his stay there? The only answer he could find was none. Sure, there were times of calm, times when the gunshots slowed, but there was always the fact that the calm would end. Sure, people joked while they were over there, but it wasn't like home. Nothing there was like home. And with the thought of home on his mind, he was the happiest he had been in a while. His biggest concern about the entire war was over. He was done. Raymond Spencer returned home to his brothers, sisters, and mother. He had seen things in which he wished upon no man to see. He couldn't stop thinking about it, but he was determined not to let it get to him. He had done what he thought could never happen. He came home alive. He was discharged honorably from the Army and lives a normal life. Raymond Spencer is a man who did what he thought was right, a man who served his country with honor, a man who had lived through the worst and served with the best.
War is a terrible thing, but believe it or not, I can't figure out for the love of me why there are a lot of people in this world that hate freedom. Why they hate freedom, I'll never, ever, ever know. But because of that is the reason we have to fight for freedom so that we can live to be free.